Buffalo Bills training camp is officially underway. We learned a lot on day one, and I'm going to break it all down for you today on Locked On Bills.
You are Locked On Bills, your daily Buffalo Bills podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, Bills Mafia? It's Joe Marino, author of Go Bills and Buffalo's Run, also the co-host of the Locked On NFL Scouting Podcast, and I'm your host of Locked On Bills. Want to thank you for making Locked On Bills your first listen every day, and a big welcome and shout out to our everydayers. You know who you are. Those of you who never miss a single episode, I appreciate y'all being here very, very much. I'd also like to invite you to subscribe or follow for free on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Well, folks, welcome in. We finally have new information to discuss regarding the Buffalo Bills. Training camp kicked off on Wednesday morning. The Bills practiced at 9:45, and there is just so much for us to unpack. And so I want to start off by giving you what I think the most important takeaway is here in this opening segment. And I think there's two things that I want to get to. One is very quick. The other one we'll have to really flesh out. First of all, the biggest takeaway entering training camp is that the Buffalo Bills are completely healthy. Every single player, all 91 of them, practiced in full capacity to open up training camp. And that is significant because if you've been paying attention across the league, feels like every team has a handful of players that are on the PUP list or on the non-football injury list. The Bills enter camp healthy, and that's a great place to start. Now, Sean McDermott did indicate that some players will be managed throughout training camp and said that Matt Milano would be one of those players, which you expect this. There's veteran players. They have a lot going on during training camp. You want to make sure that your best players are fresh and available for the entire season. So some guys are going to be managed, and that does include a veteran like Matt Milano, who's coming off of injury, but the Bills start camp with 0 injuries, and boy, does that feel good. The other huge storyline is the safety position. And this was one of my big talking points. If you go back to the Monday episode where I discussed my top storylines entering training camp, it was this safety position. And there's so much there. Obviously, no Jordan Poyer, no Micah Hyde, a completely new group, and a position that's been very important for this defense for a number of years. And so how does it all shake out? Well, let's go on a little bit of a journey, reflecting on what happened on Wednesday that gives us some ideas as to what at least the early signs are when it comes to the safety position. And I want to start with what Sean McDermott said in his opening press conference before the Bills practiced on Wednesday morning. And he was asked about Cole Bishop, the Bills' second-round pick out of Utah, a player that you know that they love. They tried to trade up to get him. They didn't have to. They wound up picking him organically in the second round. And he's a player that I said repeatedly, I was like, what's the deal here? We're not hearing anything about Cole Bishop when it comes to the OTAs and the minicamp. And so Sean McDermott was asked about Cole Bishop in this press conference, and his response was absolutely fascinating to me. I don't think I've ever heard Sean McDermott talk about a player like this. I want to give you the quote from Sean McDermott, and then we'll break it down here. Here's Sean McDermott on Cole Bishop.
Sean, from what you saw from Cole Bishop in the spring, a couple of veterans in that room, you brought back Taylor Rapp. What does he have to do to kind of really enter that position battle throughout training camp?
Cole, you're free. Yeah, no, I mean, he's got to come out and get off to a good start. I mean, we mentioned when we left to the whole team of being in the best shape that you've ever been in, because that's really the start. If you don't come to camp in shape, you know, things happen, you're not available, and then and then you can't do anything, right? So staying available is important, and then we'll see what type of, at least initial shape we're in. We had the conditioning test yesterday, but we'll see what type of real shape we're in a little bit today. That'll get tested, but then as we move through camp. And so I think really mastering the defense, which is hard to do in the first season, we're mastering, Matt, parts of it to where he can help us maybe in certain packages, starting there and then moving into the starting roles division.
Pretty interesting, right? He's asked about Cole Bishop and what he needs to do to become part of this mix at safety. And Sean McDermott starts talking about being in great shape and being available. Not what I expected him to say. I thought that was really fascinating, and I wanted to play that quote so that way there was no questions about how I interpreted it or anything like that. He answered the question saying, talking about being in shape, being available. I thought that was fascinating. And then he comes out and says, well, he's going to have to learn the defense, and then from there might be opportunities in sub packages, but obviously the vision is for him to eventually start. When is that? Is that this season at some point? Is it next season? Well, it'll play out and it'll take care of itself, but he told us what the vision is for the player. And then he went on to talk about Mike Edwards, the free agent signing, and said the intent was to have Mike Edwards out there with the first team throughout the spring, but he missed all of spring with a shoulder injury. And so you just kind of get a sense that this safety conversation is going to be really fluid, and maybe the layers and dynamics that the Bills anticipated being in place aren't quite what they are right now. So we get that quote from McDermott talking about Cole Bishop, talking about Mike Edwards, and then practice opens up, and everyone's wondering, who are the starting safeties? Well, we get the answer. It's Taylor Rapp. Okay, expected that. Came on a 1-year prove-it deal. The next thing you know, he's got a 3-year extension. Sean McDermott said during the spring that he's taking control of the safety room. We expected that. Who's his running mate? Well, it's not Mike Edwards. It's not Cole Bishop. It's Damar Hamlin. And Damar Hamlin was kind of the darling of the spring, right? OTAs, mini camps. The buzzy player was Damar Hamlin. And you start to think to yourself, well, he was a draft pick, got a chance to play quite a bit when Micah Hyde went down. Then, of course, what happens in Cincinnati, the next year is kind of just a lost season for him, which is totally understandable based on what he went through and coming back and everything physical and mental that goes into that. Fast forward a year, this guy opens training camp as a starter. And Damar Hamlin's the most experienced player on the roster at safety in this defense, whether it's years of time in the system or actual game reps. He's the guy that's played the most. So he's the hot name right now at safety. He got that first opportunity to start next to Taylor Rapp. And it sounds like he had a good practice. So is he in the driver's seat right now to start after being primarily an inactive player last year? Again, huge piece of context that you have to be mindful of there. But this safety battle is real. And the guy that gets the first opportunity is Damar Hamlin. And I remember going back to the season that Damar Hamlin started a bunch of games, and of course we know how it ended. I thought he was a high variance player. Certainly played fast and physical, made some mistakes, kind of some out of control moments, filling downhill, some good plays in coverage. But if you remember, we all thought the Bills were going to win the Super Bowl that year, even with the Micah Hyde injury. And you never thought to yourself, the reason the Bills aren't going to win the Super Bowl is because they have to rely on Damar Hamlin as a starter. Now, who knows where he's at right now? But he's the hot name. He's getting that opportunity. And I think the biggest thing that I have to talk about coming out of day one of Bills training camp is that this team is healthy, and Damar Hamlin is the guy getting that first opportunity to run with the first team defense at safety. Now, Brandon Beane, after practice, was asked about Micah Hyde. And Beane said that nothing has changed there. He's enjoying family time, but he's staying ready should the right opportunity come. And as I continue to say, the longer the door remains open for Micah Hyde, the more likely it feels that it could happen. Doesn't sound imminent, but it's also not off the table. Fascinating. Fascinating as we approach life without Poyer and Hyde. Day one, it's the biggest talking point coming out of training camp. There are plenty of other talking points, including Josh Allen, the offense, red zone, Dalton Kincaid, Keon Coleman. We're going to get into all of that here on the other side of it, folks. Be sure to stick with me. Folks, the NFL season is here. The Bills are at training camp, which means games are coming up. If you want to get to Bills games or NFL games across the country, you got to download the Game Time app. Game Time is the fast and easy way to purchase tickets for all the sports, music, comedy, and theater events near you. The app is awesome. It's easy to navigate. They give you flash deals. They specialize in last-minute tickets. They give you a seat image so you know exactly what to expect. Plus, they give you all-in prices. You don't have to worry about surprise processing fees coming at the end of the transaction. You know the full price from the outset, and Game Time gives you their best price guarantee. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNFL. That's LOCKEDON NFL for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. All right, folks, let's get into some of the other takeaways from what happened on the field. And this day one practice was heavy red zone work. And that feels intentional. You hear me talk all the time when we preview football games, winning in the red zone, both offensively and defensively, and scoring touchdowns when you're down there and holding teams to field goals when they're down there. It's huge. And Sean McDermott very intentionally had the team working on red zone for the opening of training camp. And Josh Allen emphasized this in his press availability. And if you go back to a podcast that we did in June, I talked about statistical metrics that need to be different in 2024 for the Bills to reach all their goals. And red zone was a part of that conversation. Not necessarily on offense. The Bills' offense was quite good in the red zone. They scored a touchdown 63.1% of their trips. That was sixth highest in the NFL last year. You like that. You're in the top 25% of the league. Defensively, the Bills did not perform well in the red zone. They allowed a touchdown 56.3% of the time, 19th in the NFL. So below average in the league. And that's uncharacteristic. The Bills have been a very good red zone defense in prior years, but they weren't last season. And from all indications from practice, and we'll get specific with this here in just a moment, the Bills offense won the day. And that included scoring a bunch of touchdowns in the red zone against the Bills defense. And that's to be expected. You talk about the defense and the transition at safety and welcoming back Matt Milano and Bobby Babich taking over as a defensive coordinator. There's a lot there, but we definitely need to see this Bills red zone defense improve. And I don't think there's any mistake that Sean McDermott was intentional about this being a big part of day one of training camp. Also, in listening to Josh Allen, he talked about, of course, red zone and scoring touchdowns, but also turnovers and valuing the ball. And he talked about that. He's talked about that for his entire career. But it's interesting that he said none of the quarterbacks turned the ball over today. And so that's always going to be a point of emphasis. Certainly it's always on Josh Allen's mind. Also interesting that he brought it up and then even followed up and said, hey, we didn't turn it over today, which is great. Let's get into some practice nuggets. This one courtesy of Sal Capaccio. He said, Bills practice is over. Seemed like it was touchdown after touchdown from the offense in 11-on-11 red zone work and from all different players. Dalton Kincaid had at least 3 of them. Keon Coleman, Marcus Valdez-Scantling, Tyrell Shavers, Justin Shorter, Frank Gore all scored, and they may have even missed one. You love that, right? You feel like this is a team that the offensive identity in some ways is going to be sharing the football. And so a lot of guys contributing to the equation. But Dalton Kincaid, right? That's the name. Had at least 3. Anthony Prohaska, cover 1. He was in attendance. He tweeted out about Dalton Kincaid. He said he looks like the number 1 option in the passing game, winning consistently, creating separation, catching everything thrown his way, showing mismatch ability versus linebackers with his speed and route running, and winning versus DBs with his size. We're all expecting Dalton Kincaid to be a key focal point of this offense. Coming out of a historic rookie season, right? Top 10 in the history of the NFL in yards, top 5 in the history of the NFL in receptions for a rookie tight end. Of course, it was overshadowed by Sam Laporta in Detroit, but that doesn't mean Dalton Kincaid didn't have a great rookie season. And I'd argue that the dynamics were completely different in Detroit and Buffalo, and that matters. But of course, anything people ever really care about is what the stats say. Well, there's more to it. There's more context that you need to add to the conversation. They could both be really good. You don't have to do this thing. But the point being, Dalton Kincaid, and you look at over 300 vacated targets from last year with Josh Allen, well, Dalton Kincaid's the guy you expect to gobble up a bunch of them. And that all sounds good in theory, but you want to see it happen. And it sounds like through day 1, it is. I think Dalton Kincaid has a chance to be a superstar. I've had a lot of conversations just like that throughout the course of this offseason. Sounds like it's off to a great start. And I like this quote from Sean McDermott. Sean McDermott was asked about Dalton Kincaid. He said this, quote, "Dalton has been so good in so many ways. Right away, he's just a great person with a great disposition. And secondly, his connection with Josh, his understanding of our offense, his understanding of NFL defenses. He's gotten off to such a great start. The way he handled this off season in the spring, he just didn't stop, just in terms of his hunger to grow and get better." I mean, it's no longer Sean McDermott saying pump the brakes, right? Like last year, he was very cautious when talking about Dalton Kincaid. Not this time. Very, very straightforward in his praise for the Bills' second-year tight end. And I think the promise, it just feels like he's really primed to deliver on this hype. And I can't wait to see it because the Bills need star power, and Dalton Kincaid's knocking on the door. And this is the type of information you love to see and hear about. Anthony Prohaska of Cover One also noted that there's been some offensive schematic tweaks. I was on his show Tuesday night. We did a live on YouTube, and I'm sure you can catch it in the archives. But one of the things that he really talked about for the offense was the scheme tweaks and formational width. And Anthony followed up on that with this tweet. He said, "More condensed formations on offense and overall reduced formational width, lots of motion and shifting, sometimes multiple shifts happening pre-snap." So as we get excited and speculate over Joe Brady being able to put his full stamp on this offense, you're kind of getting a feel for that. And one thing that Anthony brought up in our conversation Tuesday night was the correlation between some of the best offenses in the NFL and formational width. And really, the best offenses were condensed in terms of formational width. And the Bills, good offense, but led the league in formational width. So a huge shift there with tighter sets. And that brings up so many different options with your play action game, how you marry your run and pass concepts, putting Josh Allen in motion, creating leverage, forcing matchups, right? Kind of this whole vision that we've had and speculated over early on. You're starting to see that come to fruition. I think it's all very good. Anthony talking about play action boots, right? Just different things that you think would be very good for this offense to do more of. Anthony Prohaska also commented that Mack Hollins is getting a lot of first-team reps. Don't sleep, folks. Don't sleep. I'm not going to promise you a ton of production. But you can tell this team really likes Mack Hollins from the way they talk about him. Like, not just the coaches, but the players really talk about him. And the leadership that he can bring, the size dynamics, special teams, the blocking, right? That's going to matter a ton. Like, the Bills asked their wide receivers to be insert blockers. Part of this whole idea of the Bills offense being able to force mismatches and dictate terms is the versatility and size that they now have. They can go 11 personnel, and those players be Keon Coleman, Marquez Valdes-Scantling, and Mack Hollins, with Dalton Kincaid as your tight end and Ray Davis at running back. And you're not going to be big enough to handle that, but you're an 11 personnel. You can run it, you can throw it, you can do so many different things. The Bills can be an 11 personnel, and it be Curtis Samuel, Khalil Shakir, James Cook, Dalton Kincaid, and insert whatever, Ty Johnson, and you can put out James Cook at wide receiver and just create a world of problems, because it seems like it's heavy personnel, but it's really not, and they have speed and guys that can play running back and receiver. These are the conflicts that the Bills are able to put their opponents in if they use their personnel correctly. Sounds like it's off to a great start. Also sounds like Keon Coleman had a really good start. A lot of praise universally for his hands, body control, athleticism, energy, catching high points in the end zone, good adjustments to the football and getting his toes in on some red zone work with Josh Allen. Feels like Keon Coleman so far is off to a great start. He's definitely a player that when I'm at camp next week, I cannot wait to get my eyes on. So plenty of encouraging notes for the offense here that I wanted to break down. On the other side of it, I want to shift gears more to the defense and the special teams and how we can reconcile the Bills' offense seemingly being ahead of the defense at this point in time, plus some very interesting remarks from Sean McDermott on Kaiir Elam. We're going to get into all of that here on the other side of it. Be sure to stick with me. Passion, drive, and patience, the formula for winning championships, is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber and not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. So keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit is only available for U.S. customers. All right, folks, let's talk a little defense here. And by all indications, day one, the Bills' offense won the day. And typically, that's not the case. Typically, defenses are ahead of offenses. Am I concerned about that? No. I like hearing that the Bills' offense, with all the new weapons, with an offensive line transition, with a new coordinator in his first full season on the job, I like hearing that that went well. And defensively, I always felt like it was going to be a little bit of a work in progress with some of the transition, both from a personnel and coaching standpoint. It's day one. It's going to be all right. Von Miller, Matt Milano back on the field. As we mentioned in the open, everybody practiced in full. You had this comment here from Anthony Prohaska: Von Miller and Matt Milano looking healthy and practicing without restrictions. Miller had a couple of good pressures around the corner. Both had juice today. And also several different reports that Von Miller beat Spencer Brown for what would have been a sack. Encouraging, right? Encouraging. It's one day. Sounds like AJ Epinesa got the starters reps and Von Miller came in later, which is probably the right thing to do to get the most out of both of those players. But an encouraging start to camp for Von Miller, who is potentially a big part of this defense and a big part of providing the unit with more juice, right? Like one of the better pass rushers in the history of the game. What does he look like at 35 years old, 2 years removed from the ACL? It's off to an encouraging start. Same thing with Matt Milano, who practiced without restriction, and that's a big deal as well. Thought it was interesting that the second group of linebackers, so Terrell Bernard, Matt Milano, your starters, the second group of linebackers was Dorian Williams and Baylon Spector. Fascinating. Those guys are experienced, but they're young. It wasn't Deion Jones. It wasn't Nicholas Moreau. It wasn't either of them. It was Baylon Spector, who I guess he's behind Matt Milano. He's the second most experienced linebacker on the team. hasn't really proven much other than he gets hurt a lot. But we know last year when the Bills went 3 linebackers later in the season, it was Dotson, Bernard, and Spector. So I guess we're not writing off Baylon Spector quite yet. And then Dorian Williams getting that second opportunity, or getting that first opportunity with the second team. As I've stated repeatedly with Dorian Williams, while there's a lot for him to improve upon, he is the player in this mix that the Bills have the most invested in as a top 100 pick 1 year ago. So sounds like he's going to get a great opportunity here to lock down a second team role for this team. We'll see what happens with Deion Jones and Nicholas Moreau. There's a lot that needs to play out. Sean McDermott said a couple of interesting things, one about Kaiir Elam, one about play calling on defense. Regarding Kaiir Elam, Sean McDermott said that he will get opportunities to work with the first group and the second group. He also said, quote, belief is important. Belief and confidence are a big part of performing, especially at this level, but not just this level, at many levels, youth levels included. It's a clean slate for Kaiir, and we are looking forward to year 3 and what he's able to do. Again, I think our environment usually helps players with that. Now, I think as your CB3, you do want to have your depth players get opportunities to play with your first team. That way, if they have to do it in a meaningful moment, it's not the first time that they've done it. I'm curious who the guy that falls off is. When they want to get first team reps in for Kaiir Elam, is it Benford or is it Douglas that slides off? Kind of fascinating, but also really important that this team is still behind Kaiir Elam. And as I've said, my eye is towards 2025 for him to be a starter with Rasul Douglas in a contract year and pushing 30 years old. Is this a situation where Kaiir Elam is going to get that big opportunity next year? I'm really comfortable with him as a CB3, but as I've said repeatedly, the book remains not written on Kaiir Elam, and seems like a great opportunity for him with some new coaching around him, and sounds like the confidence is growing, which is a good thing. Regarding the defensive play caller, this has been a hot button topic. Whether it's going to be Sean McDermott or the defensive coordinator, Bobby Babich. Sean McDermott said that both will do it at times, but he also said that he has an idea of where it's going to go, but he's not ready to make that public, which is more than he's given at any point when he's been asked about this 4,000 times this offseason. From those in attendance, it sounds like Bobby Babich was the one running and calling the defense, which I like. And typically Sean McDermott has empowered his coordinators to do their job. And so what's interesting to me is if in Sean McDermott's mind, he knows where he wants it to go. If it's not Bobby Babich, what's the purpose of Sean McDermott getting those reps in? So we'll see how it plays out, but it seems like Bobby Babich, all the arrows are pointing to him being in full control of the defense. Couple more things here to close it out. The kick returners, I know we've been fascinated to figure out who's going to be the kick returners. The guys that got opportunities, Ray Davis, Ty Johnson, Daquan Hardy, KJ Hamler, Darrington Evans, and Andy Isabella. And my understanding is that is kick returners. I don't know about punt returners. Sounds like the Bills got out of the practice healthy. Chase Claypool, sounds like he might have tweaked something, but felt like he was okay. So that's the only real known bump or bruise that came out of the opening practice. The Bills do practice again Thursday morning at 9:45 a.m. Eastern time. And so after press availability and practice, and I'm able to kind of put everything together, we'll get a podcast out for you Thursday afternoon. Same deal on Friday. And I drive in on Saturday, and I'll be at practice myself Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday next week. So I can't wait to give you some firsthand observations. And again, we're looking for trends here. Nothing that we talk about on these training camp practice recap conversations is set in stone, right? This is very fluid. We're looking for trends. We have 1 day of data. So tomorrow, when so many of these things are very different, and maybe it's Mike Edwards and not Damar Hamlin with the first team, or maybe there's just different things going on. We'll see how it goes. We'll find trends, and we'll try to figure out what this Buffalo Bills football team is going to be in 2024. But we got our first taste today here as the Bills open up training camp, and plenty of more tastes coming up here over the next days and weeks. So don't miss anything. Make sure that you're subscribed. Would love it if you took a second to rate, review, and share the podcast. Have a great rest of your day. Go Bills. And I look forward to catching up with you again real soon.